that we're bringing together. So Jennifer and I are recent friends and have connected through a mutual friend who we both love and adore. And we're so fortunate after our first meeting to have connected so strongly. And man, talk about energy, Jennifer. I don't know about you, but I just felt and just immensely connected and grateful for you. So thrilled to be able to partner with you and to collaborate further as we go down the road into some of these topics of conversations. I've seen some comments from you on the Tuesday's Truths. And so Jennifer and I kind of thought, what if we just put together a conversation with the two of us? We take some questions and answers from the group if there are things that you want to know about. But why don't we take those Tuesday's Truths and break them down a little bit further? Dig a little bit deeper and really lean into Jennifer and her knowledge and wisdom and coaching to find some simple tweaks that we could all use to make a difference right now in our lives. I know that there's a lot going on. I know that this is a really difficult time. I personally thought 2021 was going to get here and we were going to just flip the switch and I don't know, the world would be normal again and we'd all be getting together and our kids would be back in school, and that didn't happen. So I could use a little help sometimes. I could use a little bit additional support. So I really want this to be a safe, secure environment for all of you here to just come in, breathe, take a minute for yourself, do a little bit of self-care, ask questions if you have them, contribute. Please know that Jennifer and I are in two different places having this conversation. So as we're talking, the delay to Facebook is about 15 seconds. And so if we haven't seen a comment or as we're having the conversation, if we miss it, please know that we will go back to all of the questions and all of the comments at the conclusion of this conversation and address all of them. So rest assured, yes, you guys, definitely. We're here, we're listening, and we'll be providing lots of additional resources. So without further ado, Jennifer, I would just love for you to introduce yourself to the group. Welcome to the Clean Living Collection and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much for having me. I too felt an instant connection when we met, and the conversations we have had since have been really inspiring. So thank you for welcoming me in. I am a life coach. A number of years ago, I was working as a district sales manager and traveling for work, and at the same time had kids who were teenagers and really needed, and I wanted to be more present with them. And I was trying to run around and be everything to everybody. And we all know that's just not sustainable. So in trying to uncover for myself what was going to be my next, I learned about life coaching, which it's just been absolutely transformational for my life. I mean, I remember the days when I woke up and was stressed out before my feet touched the ground in the mornings.
I think a lot of us can relate to that feeling right now.
Yeah, because it's like, I got to do this for my kids and this for my family and this for work. And like, where do we land in all of that? Anyway, so fast forward, and what I have learned through this process has been absolutely transformational for me, by extension for my family. I mean, I've just witnessed with my clients how small shifts can really make a massive impact in our lives. And it doesn't have to be so hard. And I think so many of us spend so much time waiting for something to shift until we're going to be happy or be more content, whether it's our kids getting older or more money or out of pandemic or whatever. And I know for sure that life is now and that we are intended to enjoy it now. So,
and I think that's a passion. That's a huge point to get this kind of launched on, because I think sometimes, especially as a mom, we find ourselves saying like, oh, I just have to get through today, right? I just have to get through today, or I have to just get through this hour, or I have to just get to nap time. I just have to get to dinner. I just have to get to bedtime. So I love that. And I think that you're going to give us some resources and some thoughts on how to make some of those changes. But I think this is a really good launch pad. So let's just start talking about the idea of where Tuesday's Truth came from and where it started and where we are now.
Well, I think it started from our conversations. and you wanting to share this information. And like I said,
Mm.
I'm so in love with all of this. I could talk about it all day long. Well, I do talk about it all day long. Um, but there are so many things that we do just because we're so used to doing them. I think our first post was about being stuck in a rut. The average person has 4 to 6,000 thoughts per day. Some studies show even as much as 60,000 thoughts a day. And all of them consistently show that 90% of those thoughts are repetitive thoughts. So when we come up against a situation, we are more predisposed to respond in the way we have responded before without even thinking about, like, well, maybe this isn't what works best for me. Maybe this isn't what serves me best. So, on top of that, about 85% of those thoughts are negative. So, when we think about as we're running around trying to do all these things all day, and we've got this monkey mind going that's like automatically putting us in situations, and a lot of them not positive, it can make for even more challenging situations than need to be.
Well, and I can relate to the feeling of I feel exhausted. I lay down to rest my head, close my eyes, and it's like all of those things come crashing back. And it's like the list of things just keeps going and going and going. And so
Mhm.
I suppose there's no surprise that we wake up exhausted and a little bit stressed before our feet even hit the floor. So, how do we or what do we do when we feel that wave coming or we feel some of those thoughts happening? Consciously make the shift to get out of the negative. How do we get out of the rut? Or maybe how do we even identify that we're in the rut to begin with?
So we're all in the rut. I mean, we're all there. So when we think the thoughts, what happens is the neurons in our brain actually wire together. When we can start to increase our awareness and just stop and notice, it actually shifts the chemistry in our brains so that we are not as inclined to follow down that same path that we have thought before. It gives space for new ideas to come in. So, awareness, 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 just pausing a minute. And I think it's so important too to really highlight for people, like, we are so hard on ourselves. Like, there's no judgment. Like, don't make yourself wrong because this is the way it's been doing. The opportunity is to, like I said, like, take a minute, breathe. Okay, I have a chance here to see it differently, like, and then to act differently. Um, just asking that question, like, okay, I'm starting to think about this thing. Like, is that really what I want to do? Does does this thing serve me? And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. So, like I said, that awareness and getting to choose differently in those situations is the
And I
first
think,
step.
well, I think your point about choice is really powerful because I think that we kind of get going in our day and we feel like we have fewer choices. We have to get up, we have to go to work, we have to change the diaper and make the breakfast and do all of the things. So, where do we have the power and the strength to make the choices? And where are those choices coming from? So, I think to your point, the scientific background of this, which is we're really rewiring neurons at
Mhm.
adult phase, is really interesting. I think it's a little daunting. And I would love to know from you how long it takes to kind of work through that process and be aware and ask the question, how is it serving me? And how do I want this to serve me? Or is this the right thing to be focusing on right now? Because I imagine it's a little bit of muscle memory, right? Like the more we do it, the easier it gets. But so
Absolutely.
what does that really look like in a day or a week?
So, like, a great way to start is think about the tasks that you encounter in a day, like all the things that you do, and think about how those things really make you feel and why are you doing them. Like, there are certain things that we do because we think we have to. There are certain things we do because we like the outcome of them. There are other things that we do that really light us up and bring joy. And first of all, really noticing what those things are. For years, um, I volunteered. I was the yes woman for every volunteer thing at school. I just, because that's what I always did. And that's what I thought I needed to do to be the good mom. I needed to show up and do all the things. Well, when I was able to like take a step back and realize that some of the volunteer jobs, for example, I loved doing, and other things I did not. And that I didn't, so I didn't have to do those. And the second part of that question is what are we making this mean? Like, I was making it mean that I needed to do those things to be a good mom. Well, that's not true,
And
when
so
we can
how
look
did,
at it.
like, at what point did you identify that though, in that it wasn't a definition, it didn't define you as a good mom? Were you just like, I couldn't take on one more thing and you were at a breaking point and it was like, okay, something's got to give? Or at what point
Well,
did you make that realization?
I really started looking at um, the different things I was doing in my day and getting really, you have to be willing to get still and quiet with yourself for a bit, and tap
Oh, that sounds a little
into,
uncomfortable.
it can be, it can be. Um, yeah, a whole different conversation with how meditating and learning to quiet my mind. And there's lots of different ways to do it. It doesn't have to be like Indian style. And, there are a lot of different ways to do that. But really learning to get quiet and connect with my own intuition and my own knowing was huge for me. Because we all have that. We all know deep down. It's if we're willing to get quiet enough and listen. Uh, but really noticing what I was doing and being willing to consider, was this something that really sparked joy,
Mhm.
or um, was it something that not? And like another example I used in our post was laundry. Like, I don't I didn't particularly care for laundry. I would put it off and not do it, and it was just this thing.
Right.
And then when I could shift the perspective on it, so I'm back a minute. So there's a tool that we use. I teach my clients. So when you've looked at your list and you've figured out like what you're doing, and you've kind of tapped in on what feels good, what doesn't feel good, then, because the things that like light you up and
Mhm.
bring joy. So then look at each of those things. Like, can you toss it aside? Like, is it something that you don't actually have to do every day? Um, like the volunteer, or there's different things in our jobs that we take on that we could have somebody else cover for us, that we can delegate. um, is there a way that we can better it, if it's something that does have to be done but we can't offer it to someone else to handle? Is there a way we can better it? So maybe it's like finding a comfy chair that you love and sitting in to do your computer work, or lighting a candle and playing nice music. Shifting the focus, like I said with the laundry, and focusing on why I do it and what feels good about it, bettering it.
Mhm.
Um, so toss it aside, don't do it at all, bag it, barter it, means delegate it, have somebody else do it, or better it. Those are three ways to like focus in on the to-dos for the day. Well, when we can do that, and over time, we take this, one thing over here that we no longer do, then we create a little more ease and freedom in our day. At the same time, when we can take a role, a job, and make it a little bit better, again, then you're increasing some ease and freedom in your day. When you've got a little more time, then you can be a little more intentional about adding some joy. Take that 5 minutes to sit with your spouse in the morning and enjoy a cup of coffee before you head on your day, or take that extra time with your kids in the afternoon. You know, the little things that light us up, or take 30 minutes to go, 15 minutes, 10 minutes to go for a walk and like get some fresh air and ground into the earth. And over time, these small things accumulate together to give you more time and freedom.
So it sounds like you're saying start small, but then as you work through the day with that thought or that intention, and then the week, and then the month, all of a sudden that adds up and the space for freedom is getting bigger, which is hopefully leading to a little bit more joy in our day, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Do you have any
Okay,
questions
so,
around all that?
well, so I'm feeling a little less stuck in a rut. At least I know how to identify. And, I think one of the things that in as maybe as a mom, I don't do enough of is self-reflection. And it sounds like you're saying I have to start there. So there's not a lot of time in the day for that, but I need to self-reflect and I need to kind of take stock of like, where am I right now? Like, what's the number? I don't know. What is it on a scale of 1 to 10? Am I a 4? Am I an 8? Where am I? How am I feeling? And just start to ask myself some of those questions. And I think we're probably as moms the last ones to ask the questions and to self-reflect and to check in. So I think that's really the biggest starting point is like identifying a realization of like, are you in the rut? Are we in the rut? What is the rut? What does it look like? And then how
Yeah,
do we navigate it to kind of get on the other side of it and make the best of the day that we do have? So we're not
absolutely.
just
And
trying to get through.
yes. And like I said, I think awareness, starting just to notice is the very, it's the very first step. You know, not to say that we can't change things we're not aware of, but we're way more likely when we are willing to just to look and consider like how it makes us feel
Absolutely. So
and
that's a
looking
great
at it
lead in.
differently.
So
Yeah.
let's talk more about that. Let's talk about awareness. Let's talk about perspective and how we get to that point where it feels a little bit lighter and a little bit more positive and a little bit more joyful.
So when we can start to notice what the things are that feel good and what the things are that don't feel good, we can also start to look at what we're focusing on because we will get what we focus on. So there's an activity. If you're in your
Okay,
space
I'm ready.
and you look around. So if I asked you to look around and find all the things that are yellow in your space and just notice
Okay,
everything that's yellow.
sure.
And then if I asked you to close your eyes and to recall what, if you were able to recall what things in the space were blue.
I
So what you
wasn't
might
look
find,
I wasn't looking for
right?
that.
And so what people often find is that when you're looking for the yellow, you're going to find everything that is yellow or yellow gold or sort of that sunshine color versus the lime, the bright lemon yellow, because our minds want us to be right. When we go to look for
Mm,
something, they focus on finding evidence that makes us right. So it finds all the different options that could potentially be yellow, right? But because you're focused on the yellow, we don't see the blues.
mm,
We don't see the other opportunities out there. So when we're in the midst of our day and we're feeling stressed out and we're feeling overwhelmed, then that's what's going to show up for us. When we can pause and start to kind of filter out some of those things, even just the thinking about it, like I said, if you can take the situation and shift your perspective on it so it doesn't feel so heavy. And when we're looking for the lighter places, we're going to find more space. If you say to yourself, I don't have any time, then you're going to run into all of the places where you don't have enough time. If you say to yourself, if you can try on, um, I have plenty of time, then you'll start to
interesting.
find little places in your day. And a lot of these things, like just try them on, like play with it. It doesn't, we don't have, we're so inclined to make things really hard and heavy. And That's why I think like small shifts, just play, find what works for you.
Well, and I think you're getting to something really interesting too, which is like what's actually happening in our brain to support all of this and what the brain is actually doing to get us even to the point of being more negative or more positive. And so it's a balance between like conscious and subconscious, right? So like if we set the intention, or if we're saying I have plenty of time, then the brain goes, well, yeah, sure, you've got plenty of time. Like, here's a few things that just to support that, or here are a few more things to support that. And all of a sudden, it starts to naturally filter out subconsciously some of the negative stuff that doesn't support that. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
It will help you find evidence for how that's true.
So even though we might feel like we don't necessarily have the energy to be focused on making that shift all the time, if we start to make the shift subconsciously, that will be supported and will get us further down that road.
Yes. So a great thing. We are not just going to like flip our brains and make every thought positive like in the
Right.
next 24 hours, it's
Oh,
not.
shoot.
I know. They were only that easy, right? But when we can start to notice, okay, I'm having this thought, like, and pausing and say, okay, I'm going to choose differently right now. Like,
Hmm.
no, I do have enough time, because frankly, like, if we don't have enough time, why don't we have enough time? Oftentimes it's because we're doing stuff that maybe we don't need to be doing, back to like our list, or the things that don't feel good. So when we can eliminate some of those, then we do create more time.
Hmm. Interesting. Again, there's that word choice.
It's all a choice. It's all a choice. I actually think choice is our superpower. Like,
That's an
in
interesting
any
concept.
given moment, we get to choose. We get to choose what we think about something. We get to choose how we respond to it. We get to choose what our energy is and how we engage with the other people around us in that, whatever that situation is.
I love that. There's a lot of power in that choice.
Yes. So think about like in our relationships, we're all spending a lot of time with our spouses, for example, right now, most of, being home and quarantined. And so that perspective that we have on our spouse, if we apply some of these concepts we've been talking about, like if we walk around with he's just irritating me, then we're going to find all those little things he does during the day, she does during the day, that irritates us. If we can focus on like the nice opportunity that we are getting to be together, and like how engaged they are in, the kids or in the household or in doing their job so that they can help support the family, or whatever is the right focus for you in your given situation, like, then you're going to notice those things.
And that's a conscious thing too. And I think that's probably a big struggle for a lot of people, is just been the adjustment period. And it's not just the spouse that's home all the time now, it's the kids that are home all the time. And all of a sudden, the space that we had for our job or for a task is distracted. It's been reduced.
Yes.
There are more people involved. So it feels like there's less room for the personal choice, because it's like having to deal with everyone else's stuff. So I think that, really reaffirming again the choice to look at it differently and make the point to look at it differently. And I think this is a really interesting exercise for people who have a spouse or children that are old enough to talk about this, to have this conversation, because I do think it really leads into negativity. I think that's a really real thing. I think kids more than ever are struggling during this time with the lack of interaction. And so I think there's some really interesting tools here that not only we can use as individuals, but that I think families can use and can talk about too. And a lot of these
Oh,
are things that
absolutely.
you can use like personally and professionally.
Well, I think when I very first started diving into this industry, that was one of the things that was most inspiring to me, was that, like, when I first started my journey, that I could see the ripple effect it was having in my family. And now I see it with clients, that the shift, it's massive when instead of coming home like stressed out and irritated about the laundry, the dishes in the kitchen and what's happened at work during the day, and choosing to consciously focus on, okay, the dishes are the dishes, like it just is what it is, and I'm here to like hear about my kids' day, like opening that space, like what's present for them right now. uh, it's huge.
Well, there's so much of that too that's modeling, right? And they see the difference in you. So I assume you're sharing part of a personal story about the dishes. So when you started coming in the door differently, or I don't know, looking at the dishes differently, what happened around you?
So, yes, I think I have shared that story. That was one of my first like massive ahas.
Yeah.
I had this whole thing about the dishes and that they were supposed to be doing all the dishes, and they weren't, and I would come home like tired and stressed out, and this was uh, and then I was just mad. I was mad that I had to do the dishes. I was mad that they hadn't done the dishes. Again, back to that, what was I making it mean? Like I had set up this system, which is not worth the whole story to get into, but I was teaching them to be responsible citizens and contributors and all of that. And they weren't doing the dishes. So they weren't doing all these things. So I wasn't, again, I'm like, I'm not being a good mom because I'm not preparing them to be like, the things we do to ourselves in our heads.
Mhm.
And when I realized that I was really the only one that cared about the dishes, and really it took, less than 5 minutes. It wasn't a big deal. So I just started doing the dishes. So then I wasn't mad. I didn't have to come home and be mad. And what it really did was open up the space, like I said. So when I came home, instead of me being angry and pissed off and grumpy, and them in turn feeling the same way, I got to come home and like be with them, be in space with them, hear about what was present for them, what they were going through, what had happened in their day, how they were feeling about things. And I was also able to then acknowledge all the things they really were doing at home
Right.
to contribute and participate and be responsible and participatory citizens. And they started doing the dishes without me asking. So it
Hooray!
was really, so, it really is. There's a lot of opportunity.
Mhm. And a lot of crossover. I've taken a lot of what we talked about both professionally in, my sales background and with my businesses, and I've also kind of translated that to my family too. So I think the shift and the ripple effect is a real thing. And I think that people are looking for resources and strategies. We're in a very different world right now. And so I think people are open to conversations like these and open to hearing some of that. I will say with regard to perspective and positive self-talk, I never really got into the whole goal setting or vision board thing. And now I'm realizing that it's not just this hokey thing, that you just have to find the way that works for you to either goal set, or if that feels too rigid, to set an intention or to look for an opportunity. And if you don't want to go to the craft store and cut out a bunch of magazines, you can digitally do a vision board that you can have with you on your phone and
Absolutely.
refer to. And maybe it's just a few powerful words that set your mind in a place for the day that feels good to you. But there is definitely something to be said for that thought, the positive self talk, the vocalization of the things that you want to do that are important to you. And I will tell you, I had the month of January that I had with both my businesses, because from the moment that month started, and my husband and I joke about it to this day, I walked into his office and I said, "This is what we're going to do this month." And it wasn't just to me, it was, "This is what we're going to do this month. This is what's going to happen."
Yeah.
And he kind of looked at me and he was like, he just sat back and he was like, "Okay, how are we going to get there?" And it was like, "All right, let's just sit down and have the conversation and let's just put it out there." And I think sometimes it feels really scary to communicate the goal or the intention or the
Mhm.
challenge or the opportunity, because it makes it real. All of a sudden, we're accountable to that, or we feel like we are. And so sometimes that makes it feel bigger than life. And yet, back to what it does in our brains, it helps us get all of the things together to make us successful and filters out all of the junk instead. So I
Yes.
really feel like living, breathing proof of that for this last month. So you'll never hear me say like, oh, it's just hokey. I'm no longer not participating in visioning and positive self-talk and goals and, whatever you want to call them. But I think the perspective has been a huge change and a huge shift for me.
Well, I wholly agree with all of that. It is so important. And I love what you said about intention, because sometimes with a goal, we have a very fixed picture on like how we're going to get there. And we come back to that, making ourselves right or wrong for if it works or doesn't work, with an intention and a declaration of this is what's going to happen, and being very open to how that can happen. Like sometimes it can show up in different ways, um, but it's the declaration, absolutely, and the intention. One thing I think that is important in that piece is that in declaring it to happen this month, it's not just this thing that's like out there someday. It's like, I'm doing this now. Like, this is the space I'm holding. This is what I'm available for now. Yes. And
Well,
again, it all kind of comes together is that when we set that intention and we've made that declaration to ourselves, that yeah, our brain goes to work on finding out how it's possible. And it's that old adage, if you think you can or think you can't, you're right. Like,
mhm.
it's so true.
Well, and the
Yes.
other thing I started to notice was when I set the intention and, I vocalized it or made a commitment to myself about it, whatever we want to call it, it started to become very clear what I needed to do there. And I could kind of more easily say no to some of the other things. And I don't mean say no
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm not going to help you or I'm not available today, but it was like
Right.
I could sort of naturally filter out some of the things that weren't getting me to that point. So it's the month of February. We we as a society talk a lot about New Year's resolutions and starting the year over and what do we want to do and all the weight we want to lose and the diet and all of the things, right? So can we just for a second take a step back and talk about maybe why the idea of the resolution is too rigid and maybe like what the better option might look like, or as we get into focus and you either, get what you want or don't, it's like how can we take what we might have set in the month of January and check in with ourselves right now and either improve or sort of leave some things behind to be in a better place right now.
Oh, yes. So when we set a goal, and I think well, let me back up a second. One, I think it's really important to celebrate what we have done, what we wanted to achieve, what we have achieved. Um, we don't do that for ourselves very often.
No.
We think about these things that we want, and then they happen, and then we move on to the next thing we're supposed to be doing. I think it's so, so important to celebrate all the wins and all the accomplishments and all the things that went well. Do that. Then it's important to acknowledge the opportunities. It's not that anything was wrong, it just didn't go the way we probably hoped it did or intended
Sure.
it to go. So there's always something there for us in those moments, whether it's a lesson or it's an observation of how we showed up or what we could do differently going forward. And again, don't make ourselves right or wrong, just acknowledge it. If there's any cleaning up we need to do with it, as far as with ourselves or with somebody else, then do that and let it go. And then refocus on what it is you want going forward.
So you're kind of saying maybe check in, see how it's going, and then edit that if necessary moving
Yeah.
forward.
And maybe it's just recommitting to the exact same thing, but saying, okay, so I tried it this way and this way didn't exactly get me the outcome. So I'm going to try it this way instead. Excuse me, I take a sip of water. Um,
Well, and I think that's there's power in that too. Being able to
Absolutely.
say it didn't work so well this way and I'm not giving up on it entirely, but I need to do it a different way that feels good to me.
Yes. Yes.
I love it.
And all of these things that we've been talking about are applicable to our personal experiences, to our family experiences, and to our work experiences. And whether we focus on the personal, the family, or the business, they're all going to interweave and overlap. And a benefit here is going to benefit here. I mean, it
Oh,
makes
absolutely.
it
Well,
all
and I
better.
think I love that we've had this kind of progression in the Tuesday Truths of like, let's start with identifying what the pain points are and like, are you in the rut? And I think as we move forward and we're kind of, you and I are collaborating on this and sort of working together to give the Clean Living Collection these resources and this support, where do we go from here? What more can we continue to do for this community?
Well, I think you and I will continue these conversations. If people like these lives, we will definitely do more of these. Um, we've talked about doing a small group program if people are interested in doing a more personal deep dive. It would be a very small group, but can be really, really massively impactful. So I'm excited about that idea. So if anybody, we will be giving more details coming forward, but if anybody is interested, just message one of us and we'll put you on a first to know list for sure.
And I think too, what I love in our time working together is like, we've sort of like set a little bit of a program, but there's also room for customization based on what this group feels like is important to them
Yes.
right now. We've got a mix of people
Yes.
who are moms who are, working full time and have a side gig, or, so there's a variety of people in this group. It's very diverse. And I think that if you guys as a group are willing to be a little bit communicative on what it is that you want as far as content or what it is that you
Yeah.
need as far as support, we can help tailor our approach too. So as far as the small group program, I'm excited about that. I've been doing some sales coaching for the last 8 weeks on my own, and I'm just realizing the benefit that I've gotten from, kind of just showing up at the same time every week and going like, okay, this is my 30 minutes for myself that I'm going to take for my business. And this is what's going to change. And so again, like setting that intention and the focus on
It's the
that,
intention.
even though
Yeah.
it was just 30 minutes, felt really beneficial to me. So I'm really excited about the opportunity to come up with a curriculum or whatever we want to call it, a program for people who are like, okay, I got a pain point. I want to tell you about it and I want your help. So you guys, please comment below. Please get engaged and interactive as a result of this live. There's so much opportunity here. And I am just so thankful to have you, Jennifer, as a resource that we can all tap into. We will be sure to post in our comments too links to your page.
Okay.
If anyone
Thanks.
has questions, you can, of course, direct message me. Jennifer and I are really connected on this whole project. So if you're talking to me, you're talking to her, and we'll make sure all the information gets shared. But don't hesitate as you watch this to come back and rewatch it, or maybe just give yourself a little bit of time to process and implement and come back and comment or come back and ask questions. This will live in this space, and we want it to feel that this is a safe, secure environment for you guys to just come and be and feel supported.
And absolutely, if you have questions, please post them. I encourage you that sometimes people are hesitant to post a question, but I have always found that you're not the only one with the question. But if you don't feel comfortable posting and you have a question, absolutely message because we're more than happy to reach out personally and respond. So, yeah. It's all about creating more ease and freedom and joy in our lives now because it is so very possible.
Absolutely. Amen to that. Well, thank you again so much, Jennifer, for being here with me today. I enjoyed
Thanks
it.
for
I need more
having
of
me.
this. So I'm hoping the group agrees as well. So comment below, you guys. Let us know what questions we can answer for you. But thanks for being here. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And we'll certainly let you know the next time it's going to happen. I think
Yeah.
more of these in the future, but stay tuned next week for Tuesday's Truth and we'll go from there.
Very good. Bye.
Bye, y'all.